Well, I have now binge watched the entirety of season 6 of Clone Wars, and basically the best way I can describe this is it's hit or miss. Because obviously I was able to get through it quicker because there are only 13 episodes. I mean, I believe this season was unfinished when the show got canceled. So what can you do? But right when I went into this, I was wondering, I wonder what plot lines they're going to resolve from the series because this is, I mean, unless some of these come back in Star Wars Rebels, this is really the last chance that they're going to get to resolve these. So are they going to finally give us some kind of a conclusion on the Darth Maul thing? Are they going to conclude the Mother Talzin character? Are they going to explain what happened to her? Are they going to show us what becomes of Ahsoka because she did leave the Jedi Order, but we never really see what happens to her after that. So a lot of these, I was kind of wondering, I wonder what they're going to resolve. The answer: none of the above. None of the above. These are basically just four new story arcs that are almost entirely unrelated to those which have been previously established. And there are four of them here, and two of them are really good, and two of them just suck. The first story arc is actually a clone-centric story arc, which, hey, already I'm interested because, like I said, the clones are the most interesting characters on the show. They're the most relatable. And this actually kind of does a better job of explaining Order 66 than the explanation that we got in Revenge of the Sith. Order 66 being the basically kind of a fail-safe protocol for the clones to simultaneously eliminate all of the Jedi, and that's how the Emperor came into power. So it actually adds a little more humanity to these clones because in Revenge of the Sith, I kind of found it pretty hard to believe that these clones who have been fighting alongside these Jedi for a few years now would all of a sudden turn against their Jedi generals without any hesitation. And in this episode, we learn why. It's basically this. It's basically kind of an inhibitor chip in the form of a tumor that is implanted in their brain from the time that they are embryos, and basically whenever they want to activate Order 66, this thing goes off and basically sends them into somewhat of a trance state where they just have to kill the Jedi. So I was like, okay, this is pretty interesting. And another thing that made this episode interesting was that it returned the spotlight to Fives, who for longtime viewers may recall is actually the last surviving clone from probably the best episode of season 1, Rookies. He is now a very seasoned fighter, and he's kind of caught up in this conspiracy, and he basically traces the conspiracy all the way up to the Chancellor, who, as fans will know, eventually becomes the Emperor. So seeing a clone go rogue like this and seeing him doubt his entire sense of being was actually really interesting and something that we hadn't seen before in the Star Wars saga. So again, the clones being the most interesting and relatable characters in the show because you really get a sense of Fives' inner struggle and how he is completely at a loss of what to do, because basically everything he's ever known has been just a lie. I mean, he has been bred in a tube, and he really resents the fact that some higher power has complete control over, can just essentially flip a switch and have complete control over him as if he were a machine. So he kind of goes on the run, and he, let's just say it was a very tragic conclusion to the squadron that was set up in Rookies. It was a very tragic end. Um, the Emperor basically plays the part of Richard Nixon and is trying to cover it up. Like I half expected him to say, "I'm not a crook, Master Jedi. I'm not a crook." Maybe that would have been a little too on the nose, but the Chancellor is basically trying to cover this up because obviously he does not want Order 66 being discovered before it's time to execute it. Because if Order 66 gets discovered, then his entire plan comes undone. Which makes me wonder, why wouldn't he have a failsafe in case the failsafe fails? But I don't know. It's still a really interesting story arc. I really love the very paranoid atmosphere the eerie paranoid atmosphere that these 4 episodes generate. Once again, I love how we're seeing some unfamiliar territory in terms of the challenges that befall this clone, and I love how this show has consistently stressed the individuality, or the attempted individuality, of these clone troopers. How they are continuously trying to prove that they are not just a number. They are not just all alike. They're not just a bunch of stormtroopers. I mean, they have personalities, and I think one of the biggest props that I can give is to D. Bradley Baker, who voices the clones. And he has always done a good job of making each clone sound unique, while at the same time never letting you forget that they are cloned from the same guy. You can still tell it's the same voice, but he gives it a different personality for each clone. So props to D. Bradley Baker on that. And so that episode arc is really good, but immediately after that, the season starts to fall apart because there's a 3-episode arc where Rush Clovis comes back. Rush Clovis being one of Padme's exes, like an old flame of Skywalker's wife, and he's basically, this episode arc deals with probably the most despicable and most exciting and most suspenseful subject matter that Star Wars has ever dealt with: money embezzlement. As if that was not dull enough, they choose to tell this story arc from the perspective of the most boring character in the show, and probably the most boring character in the entire saga, Padme, Anakin's wife. And this actually poses a fundamental problem. You are choosing to have your protagonist be this very dull, self-righteous, incorruptible, bland character be your protagonist for this story arc, and you're choosing to tell this story arc about an embezzlement plot, and you're trying to tie that in with a romance that has never, from day one, with a romance that has never ever been interesting. And I think they know this too, or they have to have gotten some indication that no one likes this romance between Padme and Skywalker. But yeah, another major problem with this episode, aside from the very astonishingly dull premise, is the fact that they make Anakin Skywalker to be basically an abusive, overly controlling prick. I mean, they just make him such a jerk of a husband. Because he's saying things like like when Padme is offered the chance to work with Rush Clovis again and basically uncover a banking clan plot. Um, he basically says, "As your husband, I demand that you say no." He says things like this constantly throughout this episode arc, and later when he even gets the slightest indication that Clovis is coming on to Padme, she's not reciprocating any of the feelings, but when he gets the slightest indication that Clovis is coming on to Padme, even though she has constantly said that she harbors no romantic feelings towards him, he proceeds to beat the crap out of this guy, basically hospitalize him, and this is the guy we are supposed to like. We are supposed to still support this guy. How can we? He has proven himself to be such an unlikable little... He has proven himself to be such a petulant, whiny, unlikable little toad in this episode, because in the rest of the series, he's been alright. I've tolerated Anakin Skywalker, but here, I just could not stand him. Every single word out of his mouth is some kind of overly possessive crap about how are you sure you don't have any romantic feelings toward him? What is he doing here? Blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, I can really see why she married this guy, and they actually bring that up. Padme's like, I'm sometimes scared when I'm around you. I don't think we should see each other for a while. I'm like, oh, okay. Is she finally wising up to how this is just a dangerous jerk of a guy? Of course not. Because at the end of the episode, it comes down to kind of a Last Crusade-esque choice where Skywalker is hanging on to both of them when they're dangling over a cliff, and he's like, I can't hold you both. And Clovis is like, let me go, and he falls. Anakin is forced to save Padme, and prior to that point, Clovis had been framed for supposedly seizing control of the banking clans and unfairly charging interest to the Republic in the name of the Separatists. So upon hearing this, Padme's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Anakin," and I'm like, "Okay, well, he may have been right about this guy, but what about that conversation you had earlier about how sometimes you don't feel safe, sometimes he just goes out of control? Are we just going to forget that happens?" Of course we are, because they still have to be together in Revenge of the Sith, whether it makes sense or not. So that was a really boring... Whenever I wasn't bored by that story arc, I was just irritated by just the completely unlikable characters. Because Padme is boring, Anakin was unlikable. Rush Clovis could have been interesting, but he never really gets any time to... They don't really give him any time to develop any kind of depth. There's really only one thing on his mind throughout the entire episode, and he wants to hook up with Padme. I mean, even when he's telling his backstory, you really do get the sense that he's doing it as kind of a sympathy move. Like, feel sorry for me. Yeah, that was not a very good episode arc at all. Neither is the next one. It's a 2-episode arc where Jar Jar Binks is called to this remote planet, Bar Data or something like that, because the Queen is scared for her safety because a bunch of the spiritual leaders are disappearing. Now, the inhabitants of this planet, like the Jedi and the Sith, are strong with the Force, and they have a very spiritual connection. This whole place, the planet of Bar Data, the buildings and the culture have a definite Asian influence, and again that was interesting, but it's diminished by the fact that they're having Jar Jar be the main character, and you know who he's partnered up with just for safety's sake is Mace Windu, the Samuel L. Jackson character from the movies, who in this show is still voiced by Kratos, T.C. Carson. But again, he sounds like Kratos on relaxants because he's not very interesting. He's not. He's not. He's such a joyless character, and I know that's kind of the point where he's supposed to be this kind of hardened, serene Jedi, but that doesn't really excuse the fact that he is boring. He's always been boring, and he's boring here. And Jar Jar is annoying. I don't really know why he had to come there, other than the fact that the Queen harbors a romantic interest in him, which begs the question. In The Phantom Menace, I don't recall him having any kind of transportation off the planet to pursue any kind of romantic interests off the planet of Naboo. So the only thing I can point to is maybe during his senatorial duties in between episodes 1 and 2, maybe he went to this planet to I don't know, negotiate something, and fell in love with the Queen. I don't know. It's not important. It's not important. It never really goes anywhere. It just amounts to like, oh, you're here. Oh, I love you. I would never let anything happen to you. It doesn't develop. It doesn't serve to develop any of these characters. Jar Jar is not completely useless. He does contribute. He does actually have a driving motivation this time around, but he's just so ridiculous, and the show acknowledges that he is ridiculous, so they try to make it ironic. They try to make it to where, oh, he's supposed to be ridiculous. That's why we have a character foil like Mace Windu with him. But the thing is, it's not entertaining because neither of these characters we particularly like. Mace Windu, like I said, is boring. Jar Jar's annoying, so we're stuck with boring and annoying. It's basically like a very poorly done version of Hot Fuzz, where the Simon Pegg character was very by the books. He was very stern. He was very committed to his duties. Like they said in the movie, he didn't know how to switch his police mode off. And Nick Frost was a very carefree, fun-loving goof. Those two characters complemented each other because they each were likable in their own way, and we got to see their relationship develop. Here we never really see any genuine substantive development. The most we get is like good job, or Binks is in trouble. I have to save him again. We never really get any chance for them to talk. I mean, it's always talking about the mission. Now, if they had talked about why Jar Jar had feelings for this queen, or maybe Jar Jar questioned some of the Jedi beliefs, maybe that would have been something. But again, we're just stuck with these very uninteresting characters, not really talking about anything interesting, and it makes for a very dull story arc. And for some reason, they bring back Mother Talzin, the voodoo night witch, the voodoo night sister witch from the later seasons, who's voiced by Rita Repulsa. But again, they never really tie that up either. Mace Windu just fights with her for a little bit, and then she disappears. And I'm like, well, I'm glad we wasted that character. We never really understood why she was here. I mean, she said that she wanted to absorb the force energy of the inhabitants of this planet, and her method of doing this is basically this kind of a cross between traditional Aztec rituals and the heart removing scene from Temple of Doom, where Malaram rips the guy's heart out and he holds it up and it bursts into flames while the guy is lowered into the lava pit. Nowhere near as awesome as that, but that's basically what they do, is that they absorb these people's force energy into this green sphere. Where the sphere came from, why it has never been mentioned before, how Mother Talzin came by this, hasn't she done this sooner? I don't know. We never really understand why she's here, what she's been doing, blah 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 blah. So yeah, that was. It just seemed very uninspired. Aside from the Asian influenced culture of the Bardota planet, aside from that, this whole episode arc just seemed kind of superfluous, very pointless, and we're following two characters that we don't particularly care for. Although in the final four episodes, in the final 3 or 4 episodes, the season really does pick up, and and once again it delves into some of the more metaphysical aspects of the Star Wars universe because Yoda. Okay, first of all, I shouldn't say this episode really picks up immediately because it starts off with the Jedi kind of trying to solve this mystery of is Master Sifo Dyas really alive? And Attack of the Clones, apparently Sifo Dyas 10 years prior had ordered the creation of the clone army. We learn in this episode that he was in league with Count Dooku. So 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 at the end of this episode, the Jedi know that their enemy is responsible for the creation of this clone army, and in essence, by extension, he's responsible for the war. So what's their solution? They're like, oh, we can't go to the Senate or anyone else with this. We have to cover this up. We have to, and our only option is to win the war as fast as possible before the enemy can complete their plans. And I'm like, really? Really? That's your course of action. Just do exactly what your evil enemy wants you to do. That is stupid, and it was a very cheap cop-out to what could have been an interesting development. At least with the Order 66 story arc at the beginning of the season, at least with that, the person responsible for the cover-up was the antagonist, was Emperor Richard Nixon. So at least we could believe why that was covered up. And at the same time, that provided for, again, the very paranoid character arc that Fives went through. But here, the heroes are covering this up for no logical reason. But then the arc picks up because Yoda starts hearing the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn. By the way, it was nice to hear Liam Neeson back. He hears the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, who tells him like, go to this place and seek training from these three metaphysical force beings to learn how to retain your consciousness after death. And we know this will eventually lead to Yoda and Obi-Wan being able to become Force ghosts. Now this actually provided an interesting story arc for Yoda, and what was really interesting about it was because it was really one of the only times we have seen Yoda vulnerable. We have seen him at a loss of what to do. The other Jedi think he's crazy, and he kind of goes on this journey of self-discovery. He faces his own demons. He fights this this spectral dark Yoda. And we see Yoda wrong about several things regarding the Force, and he eventually has to get past his quote unquote hubris in order to really learn from these spiritual entities. We never really learn what they are, but Yoda just goes into what looks like the Nexus from Star Trek, and all of a sudden he's in this planet. It's kind of like Mortis in season 3. He's on this planet where the environment is always shifting with the Force. So yeah, like I said, it was an interesting arc, and it saw the return of Mark Hamill because Yoda goes to the Sith home world, and he encounters this kind of spectral version of Darth Bane, who, as I understand it, I'm by no means well versed in this, but as I understand it, the character of Darth Bane has been a very prolific figure in the expanded universe of Star Wars, like in the comics and the games and whatnot. So, so to see him appear in animated form was really cool, and I like the design they have on him. I can't really say whether the design is true to his original design, because he's basically in this kind of this kind of kabuki samurai get up, and he's actually voiced by Mark Hamill. So it was nice to hear Mark Hamill come back to Star Wars in some form or another. It was nice to hear him come back in a new way, and it was nice to really see him do what he seems to do best nowadays, which is voiceover work. He does provide a very menacing voice for this guy, and I don't think fans will be disappointed with the voice. I think expanded universe fans might at most be disappointed by the design, how it maybe doesn't match up with Darth Bane in other media, but that was a nice little vocal cameo by Mark Hamill, and an overall pretty interesting story arc. Yoda even deals with several illusions. That's really we haven't really seen Yoda in these types of situations before, and to see him kind of struggle to overcome these personal demons and these personal doubts was interesting. And in my opinion, the visuals complement that. And with that said, the animation is just gorgeous. In the Order 66 arc, when they do a close up of a clone, you can actually see the little bits of stubble on his face. That's some attention to detail right there. The animation is smooth, it's colorful, it's vibrant, and yeah, it really does complement both the conversation scenes and the action scenes, because the action scenes, even in the bad story arcs, like the Banking Clan one or the Jar Jar one, the action scenes are still exciting. They're still well choreographed. They're still well animated. I just wish they were in better story arcs, like they are in the good story arcs, like the Order 66 one and the Yoda one. So overall, this season was a mixed bag, and I really do wish that they had taken time to wrap up some of the loose ends that they left at the end of this show. But maybe they'll get to those in Star Wars Rebels. Maybe they don't want to kill off Darth Maul just yet. Well, that's about it for Star Wars, at least for a while, and hopefully I've provided some insight into who will like this and who will not. Because if you do not like the Clone Wars, then this is probably not going to change your mind. It is through and through a Clone Wars season. They don't really do anything too different in terms of style, at least not in comparison to what they've done before. So if you are not at all a Clone Wars fan, this is probably not going to make you a convert. But again, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed some of it, or about half of it. But those two middle story arcs, man, were they tough to sit through. But the beginning and the end story arcs really, they redeemed this season, in my opinion. And this goes back to what I said before about this season being a mixed bag. But if I had to honestly give any kind of recommendation, I would say watch the Order 66 arcs and the Yoda arcs, because those are worth watching for any Star Wars fan.